Hello, welcome to our Lunch and Learn, Effective Professional Learning Communities. I am delighted to have Dr. Heather Dilliard with us today. Heather Dilliard is an MTSU professor in the PLC Family Department of Educational Leadership. She is a Middle Tennessee native and was a social studies teacher in Davidson and Rutherford County for 6 years. She is currently in her second year as assistant professor at Middle Tennessee State University and works with both pre-service and in-service teachers. And we are delighted to have Heather, and we will turn the broadcast over to her at this time.
All right, good afternoon. I want to make one correction. I actually was a social studies teacher for 16 years and love every minute of teaching social studies. But now that I am working with pre-service and in-service teachers, I am loving this as well. So I want to thank each of you who took time to be here today. And I'm very excited to talk to you about my most favorite professional topic, which is professional learning communities. If you ask people about their opinion on PLCs, you're going to get various opinions, some positive and some negative. But I know that if you do them correctly, you have no reason to have a negative opinion. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you a video made by my colleagues and I, and the content might be a little bit dated, but the context is still very relevant. So let me start that now.
So ladies, are we ready to begin?
Yeah, but where is she?
She's always got a reason for not coming in.
You know she'll be in here in about 5 or 10 minutes. Are we meeting today? Oh, do we have a meeting today? I'm so sorry. It's Tuesday, Heather. We always meet on Tuesday.
I'm sorry. I'm here now. We can. Sorry.
I need to hear these subjects because I'm really stumped for an idea.
Hey, ladies. Let's get started.
Let's get right. Who's got something new?
Okay, how long is this going to last? Because I have got to go make coffee.
Well, you know PLC is during our planning time, so it's going to take all of our planning time.
Well, look, guys, let's just look at our data.
Okay, great.
Well, I am brain mine. What sounds like a good number to be non-proficient? Like 14%? Sounds pretty good. Excuse me. I hate to interrupt. Was that Mr. Hunter just put a trash bag on the door? I know we don't have to eat with these kids again. What happened to duty-free lunch? This is just ridiculous. If first it was last week, now it's this week. I need a break from these kids.
Well, let's take a look at our data today. Let's do it and see how everyone did on their test this week. I had about 13% not proficient on that first standard that we covered this week.
I had almost exactly the same thing.
I'm kind of embarrassed because I had 30% that didn't.
Well, I had 20%.
I actually had about 2%.
2%?
Yes, 2%.
What did you do, Miss Boyd?
Well, the strategy I used this time.
Miss Boyd, can you share with us what you did to get such great scores?
Sure. You know, ladies, I actually did what we talked about in our last PLC meeting. The exact same thing.
I did too.
Really?
Exactly. And I got such low numbers.
So what did you do?
What do you mean? I did the same thing.
Share with what you did. We all did the same thing.
Oh, how did you start? No, I'm not going to share my strategies with you at all. No.
I know she just didn't say that she
Well,
didn't want to share her computer away and show us what you did.
Well, I have something more important to do on my computer, so I'm not
It's a
going to put it on there.
PLC, Miss Boyd. PLC.
I'm
Professional
here.
Learning Community.
I am here.
You're here, but you're not sharing.
And you know what? As you all know, I am very competitive. I am not going to share my strategy that I worked very hard on and very long with you all.
But we share with you.
I cannot help you all are not as creative as me.
Guys, we're fixed PLC. We're a team, and there's no I in team. Why are you telling me? You need to tell Miss, I don't want to share.
Guys, you're right. I'm not going to share. in my room real quick and I'll get it for you.
Oh, thank you so much. Girl, did you hear Jane Dilliard? She put on look at her. It was even on Twitter. She did not tweet about it. How embarrassing. Because she don't have a job.
Oh, what was she about?
Oh my gosh, look at this. You know, Jane Dilliard you react, right? Are you serious? She put a status on about the principal and everything. You know she don't get to rehire her either.
Her management is horrible.
Look at this picture.
Is that how
professional? That is ridiculous. Okay, ladies, so we got this new list of critical words for Common Core. So I think we should really sit down and take a minute and share some strategies on how we're going to incorporate these words into our lesson plans.
Okay. Hey, I just came back from a Common Core training, and it's kind of like a breath of fresh air. It's a new start. There's going to be a ton of changes coming ahead.
Yeah, I've heard about a lot of changes. Well, I tell you what, I am not changing.
What?
I'm not changing a thing.
Why not?
Why should I change?
Wait, y'all are not going to say anything, so I'm going to say it. You cannot keep using the same 1987 lesson plans and thinking you're going to be able to go status quo.
I don't know why not. They worked for the past however many years. I can still use them.
Are they working really?
Yes, they're working.
The paper's all brown. The kids are not involved. They don't like your lesson.
I teach history. History does not change. There's no reason for me to change my lesson plan.
But it's not about you. It just involves you.
I just came back from a Common Core training yesterday. I'm kind of excited. It's like a breath of fresh air. It's a new start. There are going to be a lot of changes.
Yeah, but I think we should all make a commitment to include Common Core in what we do every day.
Sure.
I agree. Common Core just doesn't affect math and reading and language arts.
You know, I know all this, but I have to be honest. I'm nervous. I'm really nervous about these changes.
Well, I think we all are nervous about it.
But look at how fun.
Yeah, we're in this together. We're all in the same boat together. That's one good thing. If I have to be in the boat, I think I'll for you.
So as I was saying before, the content of that was a little dated with the Common Core, but the context is still very relevant. And we're going to talk about those do's and don'ts as we go through. Now, the things I'll be discussing today are really not my own ideas. The majority of them comes from three authors. The first one is Robert Aker, who is a Tennessee native, and the next is A Husband and Wife, which is Richard and Rebecca Dufour. They've written several books along with a few other co-authors, and I'll be using a lot of their work in what I'm discussing today. There's also two main books that I will be referring to. The first one is called Revisiting Professional Learning Communities at Work, which was written in 2008, and it gives a very thorough explanation of what PLCs are and how you can formulate those. And the second one is called Learning by Doing. It's the second edition of that, produced in 2006, and it gives a lot of practical application. I also wanted to put a plug in for two websites that are really wonderful. The first one's called All Things PLC, and it gives you a lot of information about learning the basics on PLCs. It also has the latest research and several free resources. But also, you can find schools that are similar to your school that have the same demographics and find out what they're doing to make it work for them. Now, this was produced by a company called Solution Tree, and Solution Tree is not paying me to put a plug in for them, but I encourage you to look at their site. They've got some great professional development, both online and on-site, and also free resources. And one of the best resources produced by Solution Tree is a series of DVDs called Professional Learning Communities at Work, The Power of Professional Learning Communities at Work. And it has some fabulous DVDs that show you exactly what a strong PLC looks like. So let's talk about PLCs. Traditionally, schools were one-room schoolhouses, and the teacher sat up front, the students were all facing forward, and there were really few resources at all available to the teachers. Maybe you recall playing school as a child, and when you would do this, you kind of perpetuated the way schools are set up, because there was always one teacher and all the kids, all your friends were the students. And a lot of teachers who've grown up in this model have basically set up a series of one-room schools within these large school buildings where teachers are working in complete isolation of one another. But this is not the PLC model. Teachers do not work in isolation in the PLC school. They work collectively. And when it's done effectively, it is a wonderful thing for both the teachers and the students that they affect. So let's look at what is a professional learning community. Let's look at the definition. According to Dufour, Aker, and Manny, educators committed to working collaboratively in ongoing processes of collective inquiry and action research to achieve better results for the students they serve. Now, there's two things that stand out in that definition. First of all, they're working collaboratively, and second, it's for the purpose of better results for the students that they serve. Now, there's a little bit more to this definition, and let's look at that now. Professional learning communities operate under the assumption that the key to improved learning for students is continuous, job-embedded learning for educators. So I want you to think about a game you might have played. It was one of my favorites growing up, the game of Risk. And not just because I love geography, but I really think that this really shows us the antithesis of a PLC. And in Risk, all the players were sorted by color, and each player was given one color. So in a traditional school, you might think of the classrooms as being the different colored pieces of the game, pieces of Risk. And the teachers never work together. Instead, they're in competition against one another, trying to take over the world. So what needs to happen is teachers need to put down their weapons and stop pointing at one another and start working together collectively. You need to lose the thought of individual students as being your kids and my kids and start looking at them as our kids. Now, teaming is not new in schools. Teams have often been used, but they were usually not collaborative teams. And non-collaborative teams work like this. You see teachers working really, really hard, but they're not getting anywhere because they're not working together. But a collaborative team looks like this. And when done correctly, it's a beautiful thing. So let's look at the definition. A group of people working interdependently to achieve a common goal for which members are mutually accountable. Now again, there's two parts of this definition I want us to focus on. Interdependence and mutual accountability. Now when you collaborate in this manner, it opens you up to something that is not very comfortable for most people and not comfortable for most teachers, and that is vulnerability. In order to work in a PLC, you must learn to trust one another in order to be vulnerable with one another. And when teams refuse to become vulnerable, when they let that fear rule them, they become dysfunctional teams. And in so doing, they have artificial harmony if they have harmony. They avoid topics that would require them to work interdependently, and they settle for what appears to be agreement, but really is not agreement. In so doing, they're avoiding accountability, and in so doing, they're now inattentive to the results of their students. When teams unravel because they are doing this, it's because they're unable to first establish trust that then would enable them to engage in honest dialogue. They don't make commitments to one another. They don't hold each other accountable. And there again, they're not able to focus on results. So I'm going to take a moment and be vulnerable with you and be a little open about my own family, because I want you to think about PLCs as a family. So I'd like to introduce you to my husband. This is my husband, and we have been married for 8 years. Before that, we dated for 9 years. So we've been together as a team for 17 years. But we haven't been an interdependent team. We weren't mutually accountable to one another during this time. If one of us wanted to go on a trip with our siblings or our parents, we didn't ask the other if it was okay. We just went. He could have a boys' weekend, I could have a girls' weekend. It didn't affect the other one, so we basically did what we wanted to do. But that all changed 9 months ago when we had our first child, a little baby girl. And having a child has changed everything in our household. For the past 16 years, we didn't have to worry about knowing when the other one was going to be at a certain place. But now that's all changed. I have to know what his schedule is. He has to know what my schedule is in order to take care of child care. And in order to mold this child together, we have had to become mutually accountable and work interdependently. And it's been a big shift for us. So let's get back to the real PLCs. There's 2 main types of teams. One is called a horizontal team, and one is called a vertical team. Now, horizontal teams are made up of teachers who teach the exact same subject matter. So we might think of my husband and I as a horizontal team because we have the same student and we're trying to teach her the same thing. And so we meet every day. And in some schools, horizontal team members will meet day to day to talk about strategies. But vertical teams are a little bit different. Vertical teams are made up of teachers from the same department that may not teach the same subject. This would be kind of like my sisters and my cousin who have also had baby girls this year. And we'll meet together, but not every day. And the purpose of these meetings is in a school would be to align your curriculum. If you're, say, a 7th grade teacher, you need to know what is it they come into 7th grade knowing. So that's why you want to meet with 6th grade. And you need to know what do they need to leave being able to do to be prepared for 8th grade. And that's why you would need to collaborate with the 8th grade teachers occasionally. The main thing to remember is that this is not a professional learning competition. So let me introduce you first to my precious little angel and my cousin's precious little angel and my 2 sisters' little angels. Now the 4 of us as parents are not trying to work against one another. If one of us finds a strategy that works really well, we don't hide it from each other. We share it. We share clothes. We share toys. Whatever we have, we share it because we don't just love our own child. We love our nieces, and we want them all to grow. And I think that's really, really important. Before you go any further, you've got to take on this mode of operation. When you're dealing with the members of your professional learning community, always assume positive intentions. Assume that the people that you work with really do want children to learn, not just their own children, but your children also. For instance, with my husband, when we disagree about something for our child, I have to remember that we both love her. We both want the best for her, And so when we have a difference of opinion, we come together to discuss it. I bring my data, he brings his data, we do some research, we figure out what we think will work best based on not opinions, but what we're finding to be true. And that's what's really important when you come and sit down with your PLC members. So in a PLC, there are 3 big ideas that should mold the work of the collaborative team. The first one is a focus on learning. And this is kind of a new thing in schools that have predominantly just focused on teaching, as you see in this cartoon below. We used to say, oh, well, I taught that and they didn't get it, but I've got to move on. But now that's not acceptable. You've got to look at the results of your students, and you come together collectively to collaborate to find ways to help your students learn whatever the content is that you were trying to teach. Because in actuality, if the students have not learned, then you really have not taught. So in a professional learning community, collaboration is everything. But you must collaborate on the right things. And that was what was wrong in that video. You saw some of them collaborating. All they wanted to do was come together and waste their PLC time and not focus on the right things. So let's look at the word collaborate. Notice it shows you that the word broken down says to co-labor. When you're working in a collaborative team, you are laboring together to do the work. When you come together as your collaborative team, it should be a welcomed thing. You should not think to yourself, oh no, I've got to meet with my colleagues. You should be excited to have someone to help you do the work. So when you come together, there are 4 questions that you should be asking at every meeting that you have, and it should dictate the work that you're doing. First is, what is it we want our students to learn? Secondly, how will we know if the students have learned the information? Third, how will we respond when the students do not learn? But also, how will we respond when the students have learned? So in every meeting that you have, you should be addressing one or more of those questions. It's a big cycle that is continuously being repeated throughout the school year as you're asking yourselves, what is it we need to work on? Now, as a team, there are some products that you need to create. And the first one should always be team norms. This should be the very first thing that you create, because if you wait, what will happen is you will automatically develop norms, and those norms may not be the most productive norms. And so if you will stop in the beginning and discuss, how are we going to work as a group? What behaviors are going to be acceptable as far as what time will we meet? Are we a decision-making body, or are we only giving ideas? If you talk about those things up front, then you can avoid potential problems in the future. And these should be addressed each time you meet to make sure that everyone still agrees to adhere to these norms and to keep everyone accountable. Now, in the Learning by Doing book, it has a downloadable worksheet that you can get from the Solution Tree website, and it kind of gives you an idea of how to set this up, and it gives you a resource of how to begin creating norms. The next thing you need to create are SMART goals. Without a goal, you're going to possibly be working against one another. So your goal needs to first be specific. Secondly, it must be measurable. It should also be attainable. Don't say we're going to get to 100% proficiency if this year we're at 25%. It needs to be based on results, and it needs to be time-bound. You need to set a time for when we're going to measure to see if we are meeting our goals. Thirdly, you need to set up a guaranteed curriculum. It's important to look at the curriculum that the state, your school has adopted, but there's no way you can all get through that at the same pace if you don't discuss it and come up with a timeline of approximately when you're going to teach these things, in what order, but also what significance you're going to give to individual parts of the curriculum. If one person thinks that one skill is more important than another, and that person only addresses the one skill where the other teacher doesn't, then they're not learning the same thing. The point is that teachers, or students rather, no matter what teacher they're assigned to, should get the same guaranteed viable curriculum. And from that curriculum, the group needs to create common assessments. Assessments that will be given at approximately the same time so that you can analyze the data together to find out how your students are doing. Again, it's not my students, it's not your students, it's our students. So let's talk for a moment about assessments. Common assessments can be both formative and summative. Now, a formative assessment is one that you give throughout the learning process to find out how well students are forming their knowledge on the topic. And this can be done in a lot of different ways. But a summative assessment is given at the end of a learning segment, and its purpose is to determine how well they learned the information. But if you give a summative assessment properly, it can also be a formative assessment. And the way you do that is not in the assessment, but it's in what you do with the data. So let's look at this a different way. A summative assessment is basically like an autopsy. And if you'll think about it this way, an autopsy is something that's done on a body, and there's no intention of improving the quality of life for the individual who's having the autopsy. There is a chance you may learn something, and that might benefit the relatives of the individual. If you see a trend that might be hereditary, but you're not going to be able to help that person. So when a teacher just gives an assessment at the end of a unit and then moves on, she's basically, or he's basically, just given an autopsy. A formative assessment is like a physical examination. So when you give a physical examination, you are going to possibly see an area of concern that you might want to develop a plan of action for. You may even consult another doctor and get a second opinion. But more than likely, a treatment is going to be prescribed. And after the treatment, you're going to maybe wait a particular amount of time and then re-examine the individual to determine if the treatment has worked. And that's how you turn a summative into a formative. If you notice that there are weaknesses and you create a plan for remediating, then you can do something with that data. Again, it's all about how you analyze the data. But unfortunately, most teachers have never been taught how to analyze data. So we're going to take a minute and talk about how we can do this. And we're going to look at a set of data from a fictitious PLC. And what you see here is a set of data that was produced for an assessment that had 4 separate skills that were tested. You'll also notice that 4 teachers gave the assessment. Let's look now at the target score. The teachers agreed that if the students got an 80%, they would be considered on target. Now, one of the common mistakes is to look only at the test averages. And if you do that, you'll notice below the test averages, there was only one skill that someone scored below 80%. And when you look at it this way, you might get excited and think, oh, wonderful, we're doing great. But this is not the way that you should look at the data. You must look student by student and skill by skill. And in the state of Tennessee, where RTI is being used now in every county, or it's supposed to be used, learning how to look at data student by student and skill by skill is very important. So let's do that now. I've highlighted all the students in each essential skill that scored below the 80%. And let's look now at student number 3 in Teacher 2's classroom. And you'll notice on skill 1 that that student scored 60%. But on the other 3 skills, the person has scored on target and above, even 100 on one. So this student may need just a little remediation in that one skill. Well, now let's move to another student. We'll look at student number 8 in Teacher 1's class. And you'll notice that in 2 of the skills, this person was below the target, very much below in one of them. So this student obviously needs even more remediation. Let's look at another student. You'll notice here this student has in all 4 areas scored below the target. This student may be a student that needs even more help. This might need Tier 3 remediation in RTI, and this is a student that the teacher needs to pay close attention to. Now, another thing that you can look at when you analyze the data in this way are the individual strengths and weaknesses of the teachers. You'll notice at the bottom of the screen, I've highlighted the percentage of students that were proficient. Let's notice Teacher 3. This teacher scored 100% on 3 of the skills. So this teacher obviously really knows his or her stuff about whatever these skills were. Now, if we look on, the next teacher, Teacher 4, is really struggling in skill number 3. And that teacher does not need to feel embarrassed to bring his or her data to the meeting. And if they have set up the team so that they are able to trust one another, that teacher is going to be okay with bringing this data. You'll notice that she or he was on target with the other 3, but that person really needs help with strategies for skill number 3. And obviously, there's someone in the group who can provide them with really good information. So that teacher should be excited to go to the PLC meeting to find out good ways to help the students that are assigned to him or her. So once you've analyzed this data, now it's time to organize the students by those who need remediation and those that do not. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about my experience with my PLC team. There were 3 of us in my horizontal team, myself, Rick, and Rachel. And instead of us working in isolation, each of us inventing our own wheel of how we were going to deal with each skill that we were teaching, we would come together and we would collectively plan how we were going to build our wheel. Now, each of us were assigned a group of students at the beginning of the school year. They were randomly placed in our class, and we didn't let that keep us from moving the kids around when we saw a need for doing that. we would give an assessment, we would analyze the data, and then we would sort the students. Let me explain that. Let's say that we realized that some of our students, they really needed some foundational support. Another group had mastered the basics but needed more instructions on how to connect those skills together. And a third group has mastered the skills and they are ready to move on. So for this particular unit, we might give Rick the students that needed the most remediation. And he would work with students from all three of our classrooms who were on that level. I might receive the second level of students, and Rachel would receive the third group, and she would be able to do some really fun enrichment with that group. And all three of us would have students from each of the other two teachers assigned classroom roles. And the students were used to this. They really were not bothered at all by the switch and really enjoyed it, as a matter of fact. Now, another way we might do this is we might teach to our strengths. There might be a unit that we realized that Rick had a really strong strength in, or Rachel did, or I did, and so on the first day, Rachel would go to Rick's class and teach. Rick would go to my class and teach, and I would go to Rachel's class. The three of us would teach our strong lesson. The next day, we would move. Rick's now in Rachel's class, I'm now in Rick's class, and Rachel's now in my class, teaching that exact same lesson to a second group of students. And the third day, we're back with our own classes, teaching that again. So the students have now been taught this information by the person who really was the strongest in this situation. What you need to realize is that two heads are going to work better than one. And many of you may be really excited about the opportunity to work in a PLC group, but you may work in a school district that doesn't PLC. And you might be thinking, I really want to collaborate, but there's no one that I can do this with, and there's no time set in my school day to be able to do that. So what you need to do is you need to find someone that teaches the same subject as you do and ask them if they'd like to collaborate. There's no principal on the face of this earth who would say, no, don't talk to another teacher. Don't collaborate and try to find the best way to help students. So this is going to be an idea that's promoted even if the term professional learning community is not used. So start off in your school. Look for someone in the same subject area. If there's no one who wants to play school with you, or if there's no one who teaches the same subject, then you might look out in your district. Look for someone in another school and ask them, would they like to collaborate with you? The third option would be to look at another district, even another state. Do not allow geography to keep you from collaborating. We live in a time period where our technology allows us to collaborate with people across the world in different time zones, and we really don't have an excuse for not working together. The point is this. As teachers, we're in this together. And if we will work together, we can improve our students together. This is a journey we're on, this PLC journey. And it's important that you don't wait. Don't wait till you know everything about how to PLC. Just get started. Along the way, get better. And as you go along, you're going to have successes. So you need to celebrate those along the way. Don't wait till the end of the year. Celebrate small steps. When you are on this PLC journey, it's very important that you don't take shortcuts. You need to do the work of a PLC with fidelity. The steps that need to be taken, those 4 questions that you should be asking, the 3 big ideas. Don't use just a few of them and try to make adaptations. What you need to do is follow those 3 big ideas, create that culture of collaboration, focus on results, focus on the learning, and if you do that, I promise you will see growth in your students every time. Now that's the end of my official presentation. At this time, I'd like to take any questions that you might have.
Hello, thank you. I did get a question, and which brought some questions to my mind. Some of the schools and teachers are in schools where they're smaller and they don't have the horizontal group where you have like 4 history teachers,
Right.
you know, like that. So they'd have to go outside of their school and into their district. And Cicely asked, she wants to start doing this. What are some things I should consider? What are implications for when you have to go outside of your school? And I was thinking online, possibly online PLCs. Could you address that, please?
Absolutely, and a lot of people are doing this. Even in large counties where there's a lot of people, even say for instance in a middle school math department, a lot of times there's only 1 teacher that's teaching algebra. And so there isn't someone in that school that they can really collaborate with. And in those large systems, there are other teachers teaching algebra in middle school. So they can find someone. One of the problems with that is you don't often have the same planning period. And so in a professional learning community, it is highly recommended that teachers who collaborate together, time is built into their workday to collaborate together. So that's one of the problems when you have to go outside of your school, is you may have to do this on your own time. But let's be honest, teachers always work on their own time. And so I believe that if those teachers will set up norms, will set a time that they say, okay, we're going to meet every Tuesday at 3:30. We're going to Skype together or meet at a local coffee shop together. It can work, and it is working in a lot of schools. Now, and I hope I've answered that question. I can go into more detail if you like.
If you'll just provide contact information, they can email you further questions, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. On the first slide, I did put my PowerPoint, so if they have access to that, it is there. But heather.dillard@mtsu.edu is my email address, and I am happy to talk about PLCs with anyone who would like to talk about it.
Thank you very much for this outstanding presentation, and I think all of us learned a lot.
I hope so. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you.